I could talk about the person he was a bit more, not what he became, not the self-destructive person who died at 50 due to alcoholism and related problems, who was in hospital, in and out of hospitals, including mental hospitals, the last 5, 6 years of his life, estranged from his family, much else. I could talk about it, but a lot of that is actually known much more than Ritwik the filmmaker, because that's what people prefer talking about all this while. So there's no real point in going into it. But let's also play the second clip, sir. Clip 2, if we can play it, because that is, again, that's 3 scenes from the same film, Shubharna, which is about home.
সেটা কত দূরে? তাও জানো না? 360
So, if you've seen the film, if you've watched the film, you know what these scenes signify. In case you haven't, a quick sort of a recap is this family moving from one part of from Bengal to near the Shubharna River to work. The older person, Abhi Bhattacharya's character, he has a younger daughter who grows up to be Madhumi Mukherjee. They look for that home that isn't quite there, which is why the character with the hat on the head, who's the manager of the estate, the gentleman goes to work and is talking about this beautiful home and is admonished by Abhi Bhattacharya's character for lying to a kid. So basically, that house is not there. That home is not there. But that home is what sort of binds all these characters together. Madhuri Mukherjee's character and Abhi Bhattacharya's character are estranged, which is why Madhuri Mukherjee's son, in the last clip, actually meets his mama for the first time, really. And the mama accepts him for the first time after Madhuri Mukherjee's character has died, in a scene that is perhaps one of the greatest in film history, in world cinema history. But that's for another time. But, to bring what we were talking about to this, it's partition and everything else that homelessness, etc., and home that we were talking about, were not Ritwik's chosen topics by chance or just by a whim. He actually advised his students, John, Manikal, Kumar Shahani, everybody else, Adur, Ketan Mehta, various others, to work on films based in the milieu that they were most familiar with. He was very strong on this. Do I agree with this? Do all of you agree with this? Perhaps not. Satyajit Ray I'll actually bring him in a moment. Satyajit Ray, his trilogy, the Apu trilogy, is based on a life he's got no clue about. That was not his life. He was an urbane person, growing up in Calcutta, not affluent necessarily, but culturally and in many other ways very privileged. He certainly wasn't from the milieu he made Pother Panchali, Oparajito, and Opu Shangshar in. So, do you have to? You don't have to. Great films have been made on milieus the film director is not familiar with. But that's what he thought was how it should be. And I bring in Ketan Mehta first, again, something that he wrote in the book. And I'll contrast it with something Paramrata Chattopadhyay, the film actor, director, producer, also said. Ketan Mehta says, when I made my first film, Bhavni Bhavai, in 1981, there was most certainly that aspect of making a film on a subject I was familiar with, something I knew and cared about. After I graduated from the Film Institute, where he was part of some workshops that Ritwik Ghatak took, I worked as a television producer for the Indian Space Research Organization with their experimental program called SITE, Satellite Instructional Television Experiment, where we traveled to rural areas and were given the freedom to create content with the villagers and develop scripts with them and use them as actors, telecasting the production directly via satellite into the homes of the people in that particular district, Khera in Gujarat in my case. It was quite an amazing experience where I worked with the people at the grassroots level, looking at their social issues, their problems, the dynamics of a changing society, and then trying to create meaningful content out of that interaction. That was a keen learning curve for me, and during that time, we came across the caste riots in Gujarat. Following the policy of reservation introduced in 1975, the most widespread riots took place in 1981. The violence against the people branded untouchables. That had an impact on me, and that was the germ for Bhavni Bhavai. Ketan Mehta has made films completely out of that zone later, but he certainly started with what Ritwik felt was the right way to go. Parambrata Chattopadhyay, who's actually related to Ritwik Ghatak, he's a grandnephew, a popular filmmaker, a popular film actor. I believe Ritwik said that people are best served by making films about what they know best. But I don't know if that is fair. I come from a middle class background in Calcutta, so that's the milieu that I know best. Does that mean that I should not attempt to make a film set against the backdrop of the Delhi elite, for example, or the impoverished people living in Purulia or in the Bastar? If I feel like making something along those lines, I think it's natural on the part of an artist to want to explore realities that they are not inherently familiar with. And that is very much there in Ray's work, as I mentioned, about situations and people he might not have a direct connect with. I know, for example, that the writer Kamal Kumar Mojumdar disapproved of Ray's aesthetic and artistic portrayal of rural poverty in Pother Pachali, but we have lived in the shadow of that film for all these years, and I'm okay with that. So so that's something he stressed upon a lot in his teachings in class at the FTII and in his interactions even with people like Gautam Ghosh, the Bengali filmmaker who never studied at the FTII. He says the same thing, that Ritwik was very very strong on that make films about subjects that you're obsessed with, that you need to be obsessed with a subject or very passionate about a subject to really talk about it or make sense when you talk about it. Which brings us back to home, because home is obviously his main subject. All the aspects of home truths, home lies, as I've just called this, the home that isn't there, the home that was there, the home that could be there, the home that isn't, wasn't, will never be. And the last part of this talk is about a film that I've been trying to work on a little bit off late, his film called Bari Theke Paliye, which was his third film, supposedly a children's film, shown in Calcutta during the summer holidays throughout our childhoods in the 80s as a children's film, along with the Ray films and Tapan Sinha films and all of those. And it is a children's film, no contesting that. But it's a very, very, very intense film, a very serious film, and a very violent film in many ways. That's put out in the garb of a children's film about a young boy leaving home, trying to find himself, learning about life, and going back home. It's a very simple, lovely story, but it's got all these other aspects, and that makes me feel that it's a film that needs to be discovered. In fact, it's a film that I think people who haven't watched Ritwik Ghatak, I don't know if any of you belong in that category, I'm sure you've watched Ritwik films, but I think everyone should start with that, because it's almost like an entry point into the later cinema and the great cinema, the celebrated cinema of Ritwik Ghatak. I'll just tell you what a friend of mine, film critic, film writer, Jay Arjun Singh, actually wrote about it. And I want to use this almost like that introduction, because Jay was not familiar with Ritwik Ghatak's films in a proper way before he wrote this piece for the book, is the idea of Bari. Bari is home or house in Bangla. The idea of Bari is absolutely central to Ghatak's oeuvre. Much as there is to savor in the films I have watched, the theme that resounds the most for me is the idea of home. What does it mean? What can it encompass? Can it be two or three conflicting things at once? Can home be a beloved car, as in Ojantrik? Can home be a nightclub where confidences and banter are exchanged with an equally lonesome comrade? That's from Shubhanurekha. Or a mythical El Dorado, like the one that Kanchan imagines. That's from Bari Theke Paliye. Or the one hinted at in other films, with a running theme of a better place just out of reach, Shubhanurekha, beyond the horizon, such as the vision of blue hills with the birds and butterflies in Shubhanurekha, when reality is a barren landscape jumbled with rocks. The adult Sita remembers this deceptive fantasy so well from her childhood that she tells her little son the same story, clarifying only that she didn't go there, but saw the way from a distance, which is obviously what we just watched. And what does home mean for a fearful child? An early horror movie-like scene in Bari Theke Paliye has Kanchan's father suddenly appearing and grabbing his ear. One senses a kinship here with children who are not yet citizens of any world apart from the one that adult hegemony keeps them in. By the end, the film might appear to offer this lesson that home is your own home, the place where one returns to and feels secure. and that a stern parent might really be someone who cares for you. And yet, the fear on Kanchan's face, the tears in his eyes in the first scene are very real too. And you realize that, at the very least, he needed to make that journey, in brackets, to find his home. So, so I'll talk a little bit about it before requesting CS to join. Can we play the third clip, please?
ঘুরিয়া ফিরিয়া শেষে আইলাম রে কলকাতা।
So yeah, this was made in 1958, and this person who's come from the village is like stunned by what he sees, what Kolkata is, and you know, if he would come now, it would obviously be so much worse. But it sort of brings in a little bit of, you know, if you're familiar with Hindi cinema, this is a tune, and the words are by Sholil Chaudhary, who's of course familiar to people in Kerala for Chameen as well, and a film in a Kishore Kumar film in Hindi called Half Ticket had had the same song, same tune with different words as well. So it's a wonderful song, of course, but it's relevant again because it brings in a little bit of Ritwik. In the sense, the person talks about leaving the banks of the Padma and so on and so forth, which of course Kanchan's character, the boy walking around, hasn't gone through. He's left a fairly comfortable life in a village and run away to Kolkata to make money. But while there, he grows up. He just sees the world. He sees the squalor and he sees the reality of Kolkata, which is supposed to be his El Dorado. And El Dorado is a book he keeps reading as a kid. And he wants to make money, make a living, become rich. And obviously doesn't. Well, in the book he does, in the film he doesn't. And the book it's based on. But, you know, that's what Jay's essay also talks about. You have to leave home to know that that's really what home is, and it's not elsewhere. There is no El Dorado waiting for you. But what if you're forced out of that home and you can't really return to it? That, I suppose, is what Ghatak is all about. And that's what all his other films are all about. Tita Shekti Nodinam, which is his penultimate film. We have to leave out his last film, Jukti Tokko Goppo, because it's almost autobiographical and deals with many issues. But Tita Shekti Nodinam, his penultimate film, is about a group of, I don't think nomads is the right word, but a community that moves from place to place, finding places to settle down, perhaps like the Rohingyas, on the banks of the Titash River. And the river changes, climate change. River changes, they have to leave that as well. But it'll change again, and maybe they can come back. So there's that element of hope there as well. But so that's what I was trying to say right from the start, that it's about home, it's about Ritwik's obsession with home, which he apparently ran away from many times when he was a kid, going off to various places, but like in this last film, always coming back. And yes, partition, yes, the search for home, but not very successful at the time. Looks like he's quite successful now. He's been talked about so much. And Kerala, not because I'm here right now, but Kerala, I've often been told, liked Ritwik Ghatak's films much more than Bengalis did. And he's more popular here than he was in Bengal. And I find that quite surprising. And not. I find it surprising because, like I mentioned, and I don't have to mention it, it's common knowledge that Kerala didn't really have of course, education, people, reading, all of that, but Kerala was not directly impacted by partition. Then why? Because these films, I feel these films are not about partition, it's about home. And therefore, you don't have to have a connection with it to appreciate it. In fact, CS, if I can, I'm done really. I can go on talking for the next many hours, but I'm done in terms of what I thought I'd talk about. So why was he so popular in Kerala? What made Ritwik Ghatak so popular in Kerala? Maybe that's something you can start with, because John Abraham might have been a factor, but why else? Why do you write a book on Ritwik Ghatak on his 100th anniversary?